Okay, can I just confirm the live stream's on? Okay. Hello everyone, I've got pleasure in opening the council meeting of the 10th of March 2026 at 6 p.m. and welcome all those in attendance. I would like to begin by acknowledging that we're meeting on the lands of the Whadjuk Noongar people and to pay my respects to elders past and present, acknowledging that as the City of Vincent, we have a role to play in working towards reconciliation and justice for First Nations people. Now, I do have an approved leave of absence from Councillor Greer. I've also got an approved leave of absence for Councillor Warner, but who has been able to join us tonight. So I'm very pleased to be able to see you here, Councillor Warner. Notice that everybody else is here. Okay, so we'll move straight to public question time. Can I just first get an indication with hands if there's anyone here who wishes to address the council? Excellent. Okay, so if you haven't been here before, I'll just explain what happens. You just need to come forward, say your name, say what suburb you reside in. That you don't need to give any other details if you don't want to. You can, of course, address any matter you wish, but if you are wishing to address a matter that's on the agenda, please say which matter it is, because what we will do is we'll be bringing those matters forward on the agenda and discussing them first so that you don't have to stay for the whole meeting if you don't wish to, though of course you're very much welcome to. You are limited to 3 minutes and the time is going to be up there and we are being live streamed. If you don't wish to be live streamed, then please just tell us and we can stop the live stream and a record of what you're saying will be put in the minutes for the next meeting. Okay, so anyone needs to just stand up and just come and address. So first one, please, feel free to come forward. So your name, the suburb, and then if you're speaking to an item, which item?
Laura McKeevy, North Perth, item 9.1. Speaking to recommendation 2.1.1, the Western Interface. The suggestion by planning that the 2 rear apartments on the upper level are removed is welcome. However, the 4th floor apartments will still be 8.5 metres too close to comply, and the lower floors 2.5 metres too close. The building will still be a very imposing presence for the western neighbours, particularly 38B Sydney Street, where the rear walls of the development run for 75% of their boundary. It will be visible from habitable rooms and from everywhere in their outdoor courtyard. Given the interface with R20 compliant properties, I request that the recommendation is amended so that rear setbacks for all floors comply with code. Doing so would also allow for more effective landscaping at the rear. I would also like to request that the landscaping plan is re-examined to ascertain 1. The suitability of planting trees with a mature height ranging between 8 and 25 metres, just 50 centimetres from the fence, and almost directly over sewer mains that run along the western boundary. 2. Whether there is sufficient deep soil area to accommodate their growth. And 3. How it is proposed to prevent branches overhanging neighbouring roofs, given the tree's potential to spread between 5 and 15 metres. At 2.13, social housing details. If the apartments are ultimately used entirely or in part as social housing, are there any recommendations Council can make to obtain a guarantee for the neighbourhood that tenants with known complex needs more suited to supported accommodation will not be housed in this project? Small bedrooms. It appears administration have dismissed DPR's concerns over 2.8 metre deep bedrooms. If this is the case, I would request that this be reconsidered. This dimension will result in difficulty navigating around the bed for anyone using walking aids or a wheelchair. This will limit the range of potentially suitable tenants and pose difficulties for seniors ageing in place. Disabled parking. Is the Council able to make recommendations that provision is made for disabled parking? I note State Planning Policy Principle 9 requires the development to cater to a diverse range of people. Additional points. Have mould issues been considered in relation to laundry position and the windowless bathrooms? Where is washing going to be dried? Isn't it a bit late to leave it until after construction to be determined? Will the local community be given an input on the community art proposed? And last point, how are noise issues related to parking right on the rear and side boundaries going to be managed? Because there are bedrooms in those positions and it will be noisy. Thank you.
Thank you very much, and well done on the timing. Okay, whoever would like to address the council now, you just need to come forward.
Hello, I'm Maureen Shock, North. Of windows to the rooms, both in the development and to those at 405 Charles Street. Positioning of the bin area directly opposite the bedrooms of the southern B2 ground floor apartment, and the bedroom of the apartment directly adjacent to the communal space on the 5th story. Hope I didn't read too fast.
Thank you. Would your next person like to address the meeting?
Hello, my name's Emma Braben. I'm also a resident in North Perth and I've come to address agenda item 9.1 as well. I live in the immediate vicinity of the proposed development and I want to be clear from the outset that I'm not opposed to the development or increased density in the neighbourhood. I do recognise we live in an inner city suburb. My concern is that the developments of this scale must be designed and assessed properly in line with the city's planning policies and the R codes. I'd like to briefly explain why it's so important to me. Christmas Eve 2024, my 3-year-old son was struck by a car and it is pure luck. He was on a footpath. It's pure luck that he wasn't killed. The car was a careless driver exiting from an outdated carport that had no visibility of the footpath. I spoke to a counsellor, Nicole, you were very kind. You put us in contact with the city's engineers and planning people. They provided recommendations to the owners of that property to improve the safety of the carport. But at the end of the day, I was told, and it's correct, that there is nothing we can do to retrospectively change a development or structure once it is approved. It is simply pure luck that my child was not killed. And I'm very concerned about this development and in the increased traffic that it would have in the neighbourhood. I live on the street that immediately backs onto Charles Street, Sydney Street, and with the carport example, the owners did not adopt one safety improvement measure, which goes to show that these sort of developments must be considered properly at the planning stage. I'm particularly mindful of the parking and traffic impacts. There are 12 fewer resident bays, 5 fewer visitor bays, and 4 fewer motorcycle bays, and I'd like to strongly suggest that the city's submission to the WAPC be amended to require that they have the right mix of parking to support the development. The developer's bottom line, frankly, should not impact the safety of our community. My children should be safe to use their streets, to walk to school, to live in the neighbourhood as we expect them to do so without being impacted by a parking shortfall. If the parking is progressed, I'd really like to ask that the city oppose the shortfall. This development is on Charles Street, which is a 24/7 clearway, so there is no available on-street parking. It will naturally be in those residential streets that surround the development. I know
Thank you very much. And I do ask people in the gallery, could you please respect the people that are actually speaking and not speak amongst yourselves? Thank you very much. Okay, so who else would like to address the meeting, please? Hello.
Good evening. Jennifer Novatsko, North Perth. Agenda item 2.1.1. I respectfully request that 2.1.1 Charles Street development, yes, sorry. I respectfully request that Council recommend the development comply with the residential design codes in relation to building height, rear setbacks and plot ratio to assist with the transition to the western interface. I agree with the recommendation that the rear apartments in the upper level be removed. However, this is not enough. At 38B Sydney Street, 3 bedrooms, a living area and a courtyard directly face the development site. Approximately 73% of that rear boundary at 38B Sydney Street will be occupied by the proposed development and will be particularly vulnerable to noise, antisocial behaviour, light spill, fumes and other impacts. Item 2.1.2, car parking. I support Council's recommendation to increase car parking to 45 residential bays and 8 visitor bays. In relation to the car park itself, I believe that the trees proposed to be planted along the rear boundary will not offer any meaningful protection against noise, security, antisocial behaviour, light, fumes and littering, and will instead create problems to the sewage system, gutters and paving, etc. due to their size and extensive root systems. In relation to item 2.1.5, I request Council to provide the actual authority for allowing the PCA 167 land in the total development area. Even if the West Australian Planning Commission approve works for the development within that land, I believe it should be treated separately from the development site as it is for a different purpose. If this land is required for future road widening, will the bicycle parking, driveway and landscaping need to be removed? If so, then is it appropriate for it to be included in the total development area now? Thank you.
Thank you very much. Does anyone else wish to address the meeting? You just need to come forward. Sorry, we will actually require you to speak into the microphone because the meeting's also being recorded, and that's how we do that.
Sure.
Can we just give you some help, if you don't mind?
Yeah. Oh, cool. Okay. I'll see how it goes. Sid, if I'm in pain.
Okay.
Okay.
But the only thing we're needing is for you to be able to use the microphone.
Okay. Thanks very much. Hello, Jennifer Robertson, Mount Hawthorn, agenda item 13.1. I speak in full support of the motion to be presented to Council tonight by Councillor Nicole Wolfe and Mayor Alison Zamon on native bird protection. I specifically address section 2.2 of the motion to review street pruning practices to better protect birds and nests. Current street pruning by both the City of Vincent and Western Power takes place during the breeding seasons of many native bird species, resulting in the destruction of active nests with eggs or chicks in situ. In social media posts to the Mount Hawthorn Community Facebook group, residents have expressed their concern about the destruction of active nests during street pruning and their distress at finding broken eggs and dead chicks following this activity. This is an avoidable situation. Wildcare, a service within the Department of Biodiversity, Conservation and Attractions, advises that the breeding seasons of most native birds in Perth run from July to December. This creates a window of around 6 months from late summer to early winter, when street pruning could be scheduled to avoid the breeding season. City of Vincent administration comments on the motion state that the city's tree pruning contractors are advised to skip trees if active nests are identified. This would require close inspection of each individual tree prior to pruning, and I strongly doubt that this occurs in practice, as per the reports of locals that active nests have been brought down. I've also been advised in direct communication with Wildcare and Kanyana that they receive calls for assistance for displaced fledglings after street pruning. I also urge the Council to require or request that Western Power conduct their inspection and pruning of trees near power lines outside the native bird breeding season, and that they develop mitigation strategies to protect active nests where these are identified. Irrespective of the gradual instalment of underground power in the City of Vincent, there is a strong need to protect native bird nests from current power line clearance practices. My own experience of this was the tagging by Western Power of a tree on my property with an active magpie nest in the tagged limb. I contacted Western Power requesting a delay to the pruning to allow the magpie chicks to hatch and mature. Western Power declined my request to delay the pruning despite the limb posing no immediate risk to nearby power lines. It was only with the support of Councillor Wolfe and MLA John Kerry that Western Power finally postponed the pruning until the young magpies had matured and vacated the nest. Happily, these birds are now young adults and their nest has been donated to Bula Bardet Museum. In summary, I urge that the City of Vincent pruning schedules are amended and that the City requests Western Power to do the same to protect the nesting season of our valued native birds. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I just thought I'd clarify, because this is a notice of motion, it will still be the last thing on the agenda. So I'm sorry about that. So I just thought I'd explain that. Okay. So would anyone else like to address the meeting?
Good evening. My name's Jeremy from Mount Lawley, and I'd like to speak to item number 9.2, the change of zoning for one.
Okay, thank you very much. Would anyone else like to address the meeting? Okay.
My name's but I'm actually here just on behalf of my dad, who owns and lives at 128A Harold Street in Mount Lawley. For over 50 years, and it's in the last year or so that he has had his home on Airbnb. He does this so he is able to travel, and obviously the cost of having the Airbnb allows him to go back. The main points is the parking, the noise, and housing availability. As it is his home, whether he's, I guess, in it or not doesn't affect it being used as a rental because he still lives in it. For the noise, it's 100 metres off of Beaufort Street, so it's really close to the Beaufort and the Queens and all the bars and restaurants, so I'm not sure it's still considered a quiet residential area, but he also lives directly opposite an international school, so there's lots going on around the street anyways, but the Airbnb is managed by a professional company, so it only allows families, no young groups of people, with a minimum 3-night stay, ensuring there's no parties, disruptive noise. Everyone that applies to stay at the Airbnb is thoroughly vetted. For the parking, the Airbnb parking only allows the allocated parking that comes with the house anyways, so technically I don't think it disrupts it, but there's lots of parking because of the school and the bars on Beaufort Street, so it is for the community anyway. I think ultimately, I think if the Airbnb, if it's considered for an Airbnb, it should be for people like my dad that are retired and are using it for, that kind of thing. Thank you.
Thank you. Would anyone else like to address the meeting? Yes, okay.
Yes, but halfway through her speech and several of the others beforehand, it hasn't been working. My name's Dudley Meyer from Highgate. I seek some leniency if I promise never to come here again. I wasn't going to come tonight, but this is probably my last chance to speak to council. I'm moving elsewhere. I was going to come to the last AGM, but decided it was going to be a waste of time. Before moving a number of motions, I was going to provide a summary of what happened last year with a different perspective to the one that the CEO was going to present. I listed 8 topics before I gave up listing them. They were the Leederville artwork and the fact there were payments of $140,000 with a budget of $80,000. The Globe Net artwork, which was found to be impractical after a lot of money was spent on it. The Norfolk Safe Active Street, which clutched disaster from a very good intention, cost a lot of money and there was no return for the community. The failure to move to protect trees on private property, it never came back to council, and it resulted in at least one tree being chopped down that didn't have to. The Littus and Leederville Oval upgrades. One took 5 years to implement and the other was developed despite the city, not because of it. It was a club-driven initiative. Waste management, where the previous target of 0 waste to landfill by 2028 was quietly replaced by a target of 85 reduction by 2030, something that's going to happen anyway with waste to energy. The life cycle assessment process, which is just a bluff on the community since 2020, which is just greenwashing. Place plans, which have seen lots of warm, fuzzy ambition, but nothing really delivered. Warm, fuzzy things like widening the median on Beaufort Street to a couple of metres to make it safer for pedestrians. But when questioned, you find out the curb lines won't move, there won't be a loss of lanes, so it's physically impossible. I stopped there because it was going to take me too long to provide all the details. So if things got better in the last year, 10 years or so, and I'd say they haven't really, they've just got glossier. There's been a lapse of anything I would call innovative or progressive. I mean, the motion tonight sounds pretty good, but it's rare. So why? So when I was in council quite a long, there were quite a few initiatives that came from things like the design review panel, parklets, encouraging murals, even those green signs on the verge telling people not to park there. In each of these cases, the council suggested something, the admin delayed or pushed back, but the council pursued them and delivered in the end. That's what I think is lacking now, council pushing back and making sure things happen. So my message to council is to be more active and take a lead. Don't just drink the Kool-Aid and think that all you have to do is turn up to not very difficult meetings and provide strategic direction. You're elected to represent the community, and I say represent in the lawyer's sense. Argue there on their behalf. Don't accept dodgy assertions like we haven't got the money or main roads won't agree. It won't be long, I'm just finishing. Check these things out. Follow things through and make sure staff deliver. Things like the tree protection, you've dropped the ball. Increase tree canopy by accelerating underground power. I wish you luck, but let me assure you the current state of the city is one of the factors that didn't influence my decision to move away. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there anyone else who wishes to address the meeting? Okay. So I'm going to, there being no further questions, I close public question time at 6:24. Okay, so Governance Manager, can you please confirm if any written statements have been received?
Yes, through you, Mayor Simon, we have received written statements and questions from Emma Braben in relation to item 9.1 and a letter of submission in support of item 9.2 from Javetta Johnson of Green Arc Legal. We've received letters and statements from Dudley Meyer of Highgate in relation to administrative and previously considered matters, and statements and questions from Troy Adrianars of North Perth in relation to traffic calming matters on the intersection of Eaton and Ellesmere Street.
Okay, so I get to applications of leave of absence. Councillor Alex Castle has requested a leave of absence from the 31st of March to the 12th of April 2026. Do I have a mover for that? So that's moved Councillor Wolfe, seconded. Councillor Warner, all those in favour? Okay, that's carried unanimously. Are there any other applications for leave of absence from any councillor? Okay, so now we'll move to the receiving of petitions, deputations and presentations. I have approved a deputation by Ben Doyle, who's going to be speaking on item 9.1. If you can please come forward. Do you have a PowerPoint or anything like that? No, okay. So you may just, as soon as you're ready, you just can proceed.
Thank you, Mayor and Councillors. I will keep this deputation brief. Here in relation to item 9.1 of the agenda, I'm from Planning Solutions. We're the applicant for that particular application on behalf of the proponent. The address is 407 to 409 Charles Street, North Perth. This proposal involves 52 apartments in a location that is close to public transport, close to services and close to employment. We think it's the right location for a development of this type. We'd like to thank the City's officers for their assistance and advice throughout this process. We commenced conversations with them 1 year ago, and they have provided guidance and assistance and feedback throughout that process. So thank you very much for that. I'll acknowledge the points raised in the report before Council, the matters raised by Council at the briefing session last week, and by the members of the public who've spoken today. I assure you we'll take all those on board, and we are working actively to address those issues and ensure that this is a development that will be successful and will be a positive contribution to the neighbourhood. Thank you very much for your time, and I encourage you to approve this or support this as recommended by the officers. Thank you.
Okay, so I'm going to move now to the confirmation of minutes, and the proposal is that the minutes of the ordinary meeting held on the 10th of February 2026 be confirmed. Do I have a mover for that? That's moved Councillor Wallace. Do I have a seconder? Seconded Councillor Wolfe. All those in favour? Okay, that's carried unanimously. Thank you very much. Okay, so we just get to some announcements by me. I just wanted to make some comments about the East Perth Power Station. Of course, we've just seen the second successful Festival of Perth presence at the East Perth Power Station, and we saw thousands of people who attended down there. I particularly want to reflect on one of the highlights of the festival. It was actually the evening directly after the sellout State of Origin game that was occurring over at Optus Stadium. It was quite extraordinary to see thousands of people coming back over Wyndon Bridge and seeing all the activity down at the East Perth Power Station, and seeing the front of the station, the Casa Musica, which was of course a free, family-friendly venue, suddenly become absolutely chockers of excited fans wearing the yellow and the black. And I think it gave an indication of exactly what can happen if we choose to look at that sort of large-scale activation of sites, activation of sites around the river. It was already a busy night. It was the night that Moorcheeba had their sold-out gig out the back, but it really made the whole area absolutely hum. The advocacy to activate this part of Perth continues on behalf of the City of Vincent. We know that it's going to require $300 million in order to remediate the asbestos inside the actual station itself, and I would argue that for the taxpayer, most certainly for the ratepayer, that is absolutely prohibitive. But if there is some sort of philanthropic interest, it would be wonderful to be able to have a site like that able to function similar to something like the White Bay Power Station over in Sydney as a site. And it's something that I hope the increased activation by creatives around this site will inspire someone with very deep pockets. But in the meantime, we can absolutely continue to activate the rest of the site. As people would be aware, Vincent was successful in garnering a management order from Development WA over the front of the site, which we have now incorporated within our public open space, and we're seeking to activate with events throughout the year beyond simply the Perth Festival, and it's already proving to be quite a popular space for people to come and have picnics and also stop to rest when they go on their bike rides on the weekends. But we're now seeking to get the second portion adjoining Summer Street as well, and I'm certainly hopeful that Development WA are going to be forthcoming in terms of enabling that to occur. I've also been approached by promoters who are keen to look at activating the rest of the site and invest their own money and their own infrastructure year round. They are just looking for doors to be opened with Development WA and with government to enable them to be able to use the site for this sort of activity. Now, this is a rarity when you've got people saying, we will put the money in, please just let us use the site, rather than leaving it dormant and potentially able to be vandalised in that space between the Perth festivals. So I'm really hoping government will be open to that, and we continue to advocate for those conversations to occur. We've of course got the jetty at the front of the site, which is available for when the ferries make their way over to this part of the river, similar to what Mona has in Hobart, and in terms of being able to have the ferries come up and go there. I will continue to say that I think Wyndon Bridge is a blight and can be pretty relatively easily upgraded simply with murals and improved lighting. I'm one of the people that is regularly crossing over Wyndon Bridge in order to be able to go to events at Optus Stadium, particularly go to the Scorchers, and it really is letting down that part of the river quite significantly, especially when you think about the millions that has been invested in two bridges just further up the river. It seems to me such a lost opportunity. The big thing, of course, is going to be the need to get the pedestrian bridge adjoining the train station over East Parade, not just for the Perth Festival and not just every single time there is an event at Optus Stadium where you will see hundreds and hundreds of people, myself included, playing Frogger with the traffic as we try to get across East Parade. It also remains a significant safety concern for the people that live in the Wandoulia region. There is not a single safe area on Guildford Road or East Parade to be able to safely cross for pedestrians. Nowhere, not even one. So it's really critical that something is done about that as a matter of urgency. At the last council meeting, council did resolve unanimously to support the new WAPC train station precinct planning, and this part of the world that I'm talking about is likely to be incorporated within the Claysbrook train station catchment, even though it incorporates the East Perth train station, and the positive potential for this is enormous. So in the meantime, next year is going to be the third time that the Perth Festival is going to be at the power station, and I have no doubt that it's going to continue to be bigger and better than ever. But the Perth arts community have seen what can happen with this site, and the council remains determined to ensure that the potential of this beautiful building and the surrounds on the Swan River in one of the best locations in Perth is going to be realised. Now, CEO, do you have any declarations of interest that have been presented to you?
Through you, Mayor Zaman, just one declaration of interest received from Councillor LaFontaine in relation to item 9.1. It's an impartiality interest, noting that a family friend of the councillor lives near the proposed development. They supported the councillor's election campaign and are planning to speak to this item at the council meeting. That's all.
Okay, are there any other declarations of interest that need to be presented? Okay then, so the items which have been the subject of a question are effectively 9.1 and 9.2, noting that 13.1 is still, as a notice of motion, is still going to need to be dealt with as the last item on the agenda. Items which require an absolute majority are, of course, 11.5 and 12.1, and there are no financial or proximity interests that have needed to be declared. So, Councillor Warner, in addition to the items that I have just listed, which ones do you wish to discuss? Councillor Wallace?
No, thank you, Mayor.
Councillor LaFontaine?
No, Mayor Zaman.
Councillor Castle? Councillor Whedon? Councillor Wolfe?
10.1, please.
10.1. Councillor Poulios?
No others for me, thanks.
Okay. All right. So in that case, we are now going to look at what matters can be moved en bloc. Okay, Governance Manager, would you like to read out those matters which can be dealt with en bloc?
Yes, through you, Mayor Simon. The on block items are 9.3, 9.4, 11.1, 11.2, 11.3, 11.4 and 12.2.
Okay, so do we have a mover to have those moved en bloc? Moved Councillor Warner, seconded Councillor LaFontaine. All those in favour? Okay, that's carried unanimously. So now we're going to move to 9.1, and that is numbers 407, 409 Charles Street, North Perth, proposed multiple dwellings. Okay, do we have a mover for this item? So it is moved by Councillor Whedon. Do we have a seconder? Seconded by Councillor Castle. Councillor Whedon.
Thank you, Mayor. I'd like to thank the community for their legitimate planning concerns raised during this period. I'd also like to say I support the motion and the development as prepared by administration. Having lived on Charles Street for 9 years, the majority of which I did not own a car, I can attest that the public transport there is excellent. I actually did my home open via bus. Highly recommend for anyone looking to buy a house if you want to know the practicality. But I share a number of concerns raised by administration, particularly around the planning sections. I will say I'm fairly disappointed by some of the correspondence I've received. As a councillor, I feel some of the assertions made regarding social housing have been quite upsetting, and I would say that I think there's some very inaccurate responses there. I live on a street with social housing. I'm good friends with people in that social housing. They are neighbours. They are amazing. I think of our community. I think of my daughter's school. I think about the social cohesion of Vincent and how much value you get from a varied demographic. It's that mix that turns neighbourhoods into communities. With that said, though, the recommendations through administration that note there isn't a description of exactly what their social housing mix is, the need to ensure it's a legitimate project and it's not just a developer sniffing a loophole, and all the other conditions are important. Certainly, I feel I would have liked, there's so many legitimate issues in terms of development, but I think there was just a bit, the argument descended, and I'd like to say that it was fairly disappointing. But in general, supportive.
Councillor Castle.
Thank you, Mayor. I'm also generally supportive of the officer prepared recommendation. I want to note, obviously, as we know around the table, that council's not the decision maker here, and in fact we're even more removed from the process than we might ordinarily be in the sorts of applications that come before council. We are simply being asked to provide a report to raise some issues with the WAPC, who will be making the final determination on this particular item. So it's a new situation for us. I think it's not something that we are fortunate enough to see that often in council, where we are preparing reports for applications that are proceeding through the significant development pathway. And I'm very conscious of the limited influence that council might have in this space. So I think what is important in terms of what is presented to the WAPC is the best possible position that council can bring to have the concerns that have been raised addressed. I think this report does a very good job of that, but there's probably a little bit of tweaking around the edges that we've heard raised in the gallery, and I just wanted to follow up on some of the questions that were raised. The first was in relation to disabled parking. Does council have the ability to, I mean, we can't require it because we're not the decision maker, but is there scope for this report to include a requirement for disabled parking?
Through you, Mesamon. So the planning framework outlines provisions for car parking requirements for developments, for visitor or resident or commercial in other instances. The planning framework doesn't deal with the provision of ACROD parking. That is instead dealt with under the Building Act and dealt with as part of a building permit application. So at the time, if the development were to be approved and to proceed to a building permit, car parking, some of the bays shown on the site would need to be shown as parking for people with a disability or ACROD.
Okay, great. So that will be addressed at a later stage of the process if it proceeds. There was also a question around the artwork component of the build, and whether the community would have the ability to have some input into that.
Through you, Mesamon. So should the application be approved with the condition of a public art contribution or provision, the ultimate clearing authority for that condition would be the West Australian Planning Commission, as they are the approver of the development application. However, it would be on the advice of the local government. So the City of Vincent has a Public Arts Advisory Committee where we seek feedback from elected members and professionals on proposed public arts, and that will form part of our advice to the WAPC should that condition be included.
Thank you. So the city would have an opportunity to have some input into that process.
Through you, Mesamon, that is correct.
Yep. Great. There was also a concern raised around the location of bin storage and how noise and smell would be contained, given that it is directly opposite bedrooms and habitable rooms.
Through you, Mesamon. So the application was submitted alongside a waste management plan. The waste management plan would need to be implemented in full as part of any approved application. The specific management, or I guess potential odours from bins isn't considered as part of the planning framework. However, if the application were to proceed and to be constructed, if there were a nuisance, that would be something that the local government could look into in the future. However, the waste management plan typically would resolve or prevent those issues from occurring in the first instance.
I'll also add to my colleague's comment, under the city's local law, health local law, there are prescribed standards around bin storage locations and to specifically deal with odour nuisances around being contained and such. So there are separate legislative heads of power to deal with those types of concerns.
And just to follow on from that, would this development be serviced by the city's waste management services, or are they proposing, given the size and being a group dwelling, it would they have their own waste services, or are they likely to have FOGO bins, all of which will go some way to reducing odour?
Thank you for the question, Councillor Castle, through you, Mayor Zamon. So the city will continue to collect FOGO waste. However, the waste management plan outlines that private collection would occur for recycling and general waste.
Thank you. I potentially have more to say if amendments are proposed, but at this point, I'm done.
Okay, does anyone wish to speak to this item? Councillor Wolf.
Thank you, Mayor, and thank you to everybody who has been in touch and presented on this item. Do hear that there is a lot of concern about how the proposed development may impact North Perth. Just to reiterate, we are not the decision makers on the matter, but it is important that we put in a submission so that the city's views are considered by the SDAU. And it's very challenging at this point in time to be thinking about what that submission might look like without having visibility of the community consultation results, which go directly to the SDAU. That's usually something that we do have with us when determining a planning application. I do really appreciate the work of the city's planners. What they've done is they've tried to put themselves in resident shoes to understand the impact that this proposal might have. And whilst I am supportive of some elements of the proposal, I do agree with the areas of concern that they have identified, with key issues including the transition to the adjoining properties at the Western Interface, the shortfall in resident and visitor parking of 12 and 5 bays respectively, tree retention, and I do hear the other concerns from the community around other departures. Noting that there are those nuances around assessing building height, compliance and the PCA, I also note that 5 stories is commensurate with recent approvals by the Development Assessment Panel along major roads within Vincent. Charles Street is envisaged as an appropriate corridor for density into the future, being on a main road with access to a high-frequency bus route. But equally, it's important that the development transitions appropriately to the surrounding context. I'm supportive of social housing within the City of Vincent as well, and like other councillors, I'm a proud neighbour of Neighbours Living in a multiple dwelling social housing development. But I also do agree with admin's view that we don't have enough information about how that model is intended to operate, and that has intersections with planning elements such as parking. So with room to improve the proposal in the areas that we've identified in the report, I would have absolute reservations about supporting the proposal in full. And I do note with interest the amendment on the table and look forward to some discussion about that should that be moved. I do want to say that there have been a wide range of concerns raised in the gallery tonight. Not all of those have been captured in the conversation, but I do encourage all interested residents to seek an opportunity to make a presentation outlining your views when the matter is considered by the SDAU.
Does anyone else wish to speak to the item? I wish to speak to the item. Okay, so as has already been indicated, Council is not the decision maker on this. So the best that we can hope for is that we will engage intelligently with the process so that any concerns that are being raised around the built form and what the effect is going to be on the surrounds is going to be taken seriously by the decision makers. It's important to state that because it would be easy to just simply come out and say, no, we don't support it. But to do that would actually mean to effectively silence the voice of the City of Vincent in terms of ensuring that we're putting forward genuine changes. also bearing in mind that, as Councillor Whedon has actually alluded to, there are a lot of people who are highly supportive of this particular development as well. So we are hearing from people who have conflicting views about this moving forward. I want to make some comments around the height. Certainly I understand that if you are living nearby and you have an expectation that it's going to be 4 stories as a limit on Charles Street, then 5 stories can seem like a bridge too far. But as Councillor Wolf has just indicated, this is actually commensurate with approvals that are being given. And in fact, at the moment, it's even on the short side when it comes to approvals. Knowing that, and I'm going to say this and hoping that people are hearing this are not going to be too devastated, but I think it's really important we are being honest about this, that when you talk to senior planners in the state about what is planned for Charles Street, we are talking more along the lines of 16 to 20 stories that is being foreseen going down Charles Street, because it is seen to be it is recognised as being an area where there is high frequency public transport, because there is a very big push to ensure that we are meeting the needs for future residents, because it is foreseen that within the next decade Perth will be the 3rd largest city in Australia, and that the inner city is where we are going to be looking at having this sort of height. So when I am aware of that, then I look at 5 stories. I am concerned for the distress I know people within the community will experience at that prospect, but knowing that that is where our state planning frameworks are taking us in the next 5 to 15 years. So I think it is really important that people are aware of that sort of context when we are talking about issues of height. Now, I did actually raise the concerns last week about whether our submission could be more agnostic in terms of the approach, and I have foreshadowed an amendment on the table, which I can't move from the chair, so I would need to be seeking someone else to do that. That is basically making it clear that, look, we're broadly supportive of what it's trying to achieve, but that we have a whole range of concerns that we would like to see addressed. So I'm hoping that someone may consider moving that when we come to that. Good, I've got an indication from someone that will. But one of the things I did want to also flag as well is my concern about the continued inclusion of 2.1.3, which deals with the social housing details. And the reason for that is because we know that the council has absolutely no authority over issues of social housing. We have none. So asking for issues around the tenancy model, operational details, site management arrangements, complaint handling procedures is way beyond the scope of what council ever deals with. And I'm concerned to give the impression to the community that if we have this information, that somehow that is able to influence that we're able to have any sort of influence over that, because we have no authority over social housing, and I'm concerned by including it that gives that impression. I also will note that the only the exemption that's been given that is being sought on the grounds of social housing has been the car parking, and we've already incorporated within the proposal a please explain as to why they are suggesting that they can get away with far less. It has been suggested that that is because it's social housing, so that's implicit within that. But I suppose my question to the Planning Department, please, is do we really need to have 2.1.3 remain in there because 2.1.2 actually captures the issues pertaining to planning around social housing, which is seeking the exemption to the car parking arrangements.
Thank you, Mayor Zaman. So I guess it's probably two parts to this. So I'll start with sub recommendation 2.1.2 for the car parking. So that recommendation is to either require additional provision of car parking bays to satisfy the requirements under the residential design codes, which I understand you're aware of, or for further information to be provided that would satisfy us to know that the reduced parking is still sufficient for the occupants of the site. So that is one matter relating to car parking. I'll move on to 2.1.3. Now, I agree with you that the city, in any ordinary circumstance, wouldn't have an ability to influence or manage the delivery or operation of social housing. The purpose of this condition instead is about, because we don't know who is intended to occupy the residence and what needs they might have, whether or not there's sort of additional supports that might be required, say carers or sorry, I'm trying to think about examples, carers or perhaps people with some disabilities or elderly. They might need additional supports that aren't typically contemplated as part of an ordinary application for any type of dwelling. So where we might have an application for specific needs in a dwelling, we might have an operational management plan that will outline how visitors to the site, such as say physios or whatnot, can access the site, where they will park, what hours they'll be coming, so that we can have some management around any potential impacts on an amenity, on neighbours or other people within the development. It's not to seek or trying to influence how the social housing would operate. It's more as an opportunity to try and ensure that however it does operate, if it needs some management protections around it, those are considered.
Yes, thank you. I'm not sure I'm convinced on that one. Because I'm coming back to the fact that in terms of approving a building, we would not ordinarily be giving, it's not a planning consideration as to who's going to occupy in that regard, not necessarily. Anyway, I believe my time is up, so I'm so sorry. So I'm going to, and I've got a proposal on there. So is anyone, Councillor Castle, you wish to move an amendment?
Thank you, Mayor. Yes, can I move the amendment on the yellow, please?
Okay, do we have a seconder for that amendment? Seconded, Councillor Wolf. Councillor Castle.
Thank you. Before I speak to it, I just have a couple of questions. The proposed wording change is to change it to broadly supportive of the intent of the development, subject to the following matters being satisfactorily addressed, and then prior to determination. I'm just wondering who needs to be satisfied?
Thank you, Councillor Castle. Through you, Mayor Zaman. Yeah, that's right. So it will be to the satisfaction of the decision maker. Should the decision maker choose to approve the development or seek further information prior to approving the development, they would typically engage with the city prior to doing that. However, it's not a requirement for them to do so. So any method that the SDAU or the WAPC come to for their satisfaction should be on the advice of the city.
So what opportunity does the city have to provide further advice to the SDAU following receipt of the information that's outlined here?
Through you, Mayor Zaman, there is no formal process for that. It will be the SDAU seeking the city's advice should it choose to do so.
Okay. I guess I'm trying to understand, and probably this question relates to all of the requirements in 2.1, where we talk about provision of more information or further justification for departures, that is going to be provided to the SDAU as part of their decision-making process. So to clarify, the purpose of setting these things out in this way is to signal to the SDAU that these are elements that we think they should take into consideration and seek further advice on or further information before making their decision to approve something with these departures.
Through you, Mayor Zamon, yes, that is correct.
Okay.
I'll add to my colleagues' comments. To be very clear, the purpose of 2.1 is to provide the things that are urgent, that are important for the proposal, and they are listed specifically. The purpose of 2.2 is that it would be available to the SDAU to progress a recommendation to the AAPC for a decision on the plans that are currently before Council and a decision made. Therefore, based on those plans that we currently have, we've included, without prejudice, conditions and advice notes that should the AAPC be of the mind to determine the application based on the current plans and suite of information, that we've also made sure that we've articulated the things that matter and that are important.
Thank you. Look, I'm supportive of this proposed amendment. I think that it probably better reflects the position of Council, the position from the community that we've been hearing, that in total there is broad support for the intent of this application. There is still a lot of information lacking. So I think that is probably a better reflection than to simply say support. So I'm happy to support this amendment. If there's further amendments being proposed, I will talk to that then.
Councillor Wolf.
Thank you, Mayor. Similar to the discussion we've just had, the reason I was interested in discussing this amendment was it felt to me like the original officer recommendation was too strong, being supportive subject to those matters being resolved. This feels like it brings that support down a little bit, and it's broadly supportive of the intent subject to those matters being resolved and being satisfactorily addressed. So that was the reason that I seconded this motion and was keen to have this discussion.
Thank you for supporting the motion, obviously, the amendment. Obviously, I couldn't move it, so I appreciated it. I appreciate councillors for being prepared to put that forward. Obviously, my concern is that there's still so much outstanding information, I think, that has made it difficult for the council to be able to come forward and give a more full-throated support for the development, which is what is being sought. I think that there is still considerable concern about key elements. So I prefer the fact that we've toned that down a little bit. I do want to ensure that we are not just ignored, which is so often the case for councils in this process, which is why we are endeavouring so hard to engage with this properly, because I think everyone is in agreement that if it were to simply be approved in its current form, that no one would be happy with that. So if it's going to be approved, which I suspect it will, let's see if we can actually deal with some of the key concerns and key amendments. I will make the point that when it comes to issues like a lack of car parking and those sorts of things, concerns have been raised, I think, legitimately by local residents saying, well, that just means that people are going to be flying over into the streets and using that parking. I will say those are the tools that council has some control over. That we are moving to more areas which have got timed parking, which have got resident-only parking. So there are provisions, there are ways that we can ensure that when developments are approved, where insufficient parking has been provided or assumptions have been made around a need that there is not enough, that parking is not required, and they prove to be wrong, that council can still have some level of control over that. So in the event that this is approved ultimately, not by us but by the decision maker, and is built, and that, even that's a big if in these days, then we can start to address issues arising out of that. I will say though, again, those concerns which have been raised about the nature of humans who use social housing and some of the adverse stuff that has been said is unseemly and unedifying for people who live in Vincent, and I think that, and people need to remember that not only is it beyond the scope of council to be addressing the behaviours of people who live in social housing. You can have poor neighbours anywhere, and I know of people who own their homes in Vincent who have proven to be not particularly great people to live near. So let's not single out one particular group of people. Does anyone else wish to speak to this amendment? Councillor Whedon.
Excellent amendment, Mayor. I do think it reflects, I think the use of the word intent is very important here. I'm going to try to work out, I suppose, your question regarding 2.1.3, I found that response almost more, raised far more questions, and I would like to see if we can work an amendment out on 2.1.3.
Okay, just from the Chair, I'm just going to say, just note that Councillor Whedon has flagged that there's a potential additional amendment. We're going to remain on the amendment that's in front of us right now. Does anyone else wish to speak to the amendment on the yellow page? Councillor Castle, do you wish to say anything? I'm going to put the amendment. All those in favour? Okay, that's carried unanimously. Thank you. Now, Councillor Whedon, you gave indication you may have a further amendment.
Either a rewording or a complete deletion of 2.1.3. I feel where, yes, it does, I feel the social housing aspect we should take into consideration when they're using it from a planning context and parking. I feel the rest is significant overreach and we should look at removing that.
Okay, Councillor Whedon, can you please give an indication of what you're actually amending?
Deletion of 2.1.3.
Okay, so the proposal from Councillor Whedon is that 2.1.3 be deleted. Is there a seconder to that? Seconded by Councillor Castle. Okay, so Councillor Whedon, you've spoken to that. Councillor Castle, do you wish to say anything?
Thank you, Mayor. I'll probably start with a question. Noting that the comments that have been made that this is by far not the purview of council to decide on social housing or otherwise, if this clause is deleted, does that leave the city not having addressed anything critical?
Through you, Mayor Zaman, I guess that is a question of what council considers to be critical in this instance. Based on the comments made by the Mayor, I can assume that the management of car parking is a critical matter, which is covered in recommendation 2.1.2. Insofar as other critical matters, it is difficult to say because we don't know the nature of the operation of the development, which was the purpose of the condition. However, the recommended conditions included in recommendation 2.2 would look to deal with some of the other management issues that could occur as part of any type of multiple dwelling development, being noise, waste management, etc.
Thank you. That's really useful. On that basis, I would support this amendment. I think, as the Mayor has said, it's really important that we're not giving an impression to the community that we have a say in whether social housing is contained in this particular application, in the development that's being proposed. I absolutely echo the comments of my fellow councillors about the value of including social housing in the fabric and the community of Vincent. I think not only does it not bring all of the overblown concerns that have been raised, but it also is a very positive benefit to our community, not to mention that it is severely needed in the state, which I think everybody is aware of. So I think it is important that we're not seen to be trying to exclude social housing from the application. The only extent to which I care about whether this is social housing is if that is being used as a justification for a shortfall in parking. Thank you, Mayor. So I just want to make that clear, that I would welcome social housing in this particular application. What I would not welcome is the severe shortfall of parking. So on that basis, I don't believe that this particular clause is required. As you've said, some of those site management issues can be dealt with in clause 2.2. The parking is addressed in 2.1.2, and I think this is a much cleaner application if we exclude that from there. Noting that social housing is not a land use, it's not something that the WAPC or the SDAU will be approving either. What they will be approving is multiple dwellings with a certain number of car parking bays and various other features to it. So it should work regardless. So yes, I would support that Councillor Whedon's amendment.
Does anyone else wish to speak to Councillor Whedon's amendment? Councillor Poulios.
Just before I get to the amendment, I just want to, just something popped in my head, that a question from Councillor Castle before, that was mentioned, the Acrod bays later down the track, if they are approved, they will take away from potential visitor bays. But there's still a visitor bay, but then they can't be accessed by someone that doesn't have an Acrod. That creates a flow-on problem, I guess, that those people that are going to go there to visit whoever's living there, is there going to be enough bays that amplifies that? That's sort of the main problem. And then I get...
Councillor Poulios, can I make a suggestion? Can I suggest that you speak specifically to the amendment now?
Yep.
Because you still have reserved your right to be able to speak to the substantive. So if you just, and because I can call on you again to do that. So if you can focus just on the amendment, which is to remove 2.1.3.
Yeah, so I guess the reason that's in there, and I'm supportive that's in there, is that would get information that, like the planning team has said, that would give the council more knowledge in the future. So yeah, I guess I probably won't be supportive of removing that clause, not from a discriminatory point of view, but more just from a gathering of information for the city. So yeah.
Does anyone else wish to speak? Councillor LaFontaine.
Thank you, Mayor. Yes, I would agree with those comments. It's social housing details, so if there's information on the in the applicant's report, which includes things like site management arrangements and complaint handling procedures, I think that it is useful just to have it in the report. I will not be supportive of the amendment to remove it.
Does anyone else wish to speak to the amendment? Okay, I wish to speak to the amendment as well. I do support the removal of this precisely because, simply because we have the information doesn't mean we can do anything with it. It's like, it is information which sits firmly and solely within the purview of the provider, which in this case is state government. So we would be seeking to get information which we can literally do nothing with. And but I think we do give the impression that if we're asking for things like the complaint handling procedures, that somehow we're going to be able to have any sort of influence over the complaint handling procedures, which we can't. And we know that because we all get those emails occasionally from people who want us to intervene with neighbour disputes. Sometimes they are social housing. Most of the time they are not. But we don't have that capacity to be able to engage with that. So I think that effectively, in terms of putting this within a formal proposal that is going for consideration to a planning body, I don't think it's relevant or helpful, and I'm concerned about the precedent that it sets. So I will be supporting the amendment put forward by Councillor Whedon. Does anyone else wish to speak on this amendment? Councillor Whedon, do you wish to say anything in conclusion?
No, thank you.
Okay, I'm going to put the amendment. All those in favour? Okay, those against? Noting that against is Councillor Poulios, Councillor LaFontaine and Councillor Wallace. That is carried. Okay, so now I'm going to go back to the substantive amended motion. It's now been amended twice. Councillor Poulios, do you wish to resume your comments?
Thank you, Mayor. So back to the ACROD bays and the removal of, I guess, other accessible visitor bays that might be there. The problems that we'll have flowing on from that. And look, the WAPC might look at it and go, we're not going to take that into account, and they'll do what they want anyway. My biggest issue in this whole thing is they're making the decisions, and we'll be left carrying any consequences of those decisions that they make, which isn't normally the case. It's hard. We can't give any certainty to the neighbourhood that lives around there. It's almost like we have to just suck it up and see once it happens and deal with it then, by the sounds of it. So bit sort of we're in a sort of no man's land where we can't do much in terms of looking forward to sort of mitigate any of the problems. I just hope that the WAPC listens to this proposal and the proposals that people have submitted and actually look at them. And that's all I've got to say on this.
Does anyone else wish to speak on the substantive amended motion? Okay, so I'm going to go back to Councillor Whedon. Do you wish to say anything in conclusion?
I think I'm done. Thanks.
Okay, so I'm going to put the proposal. All those in favour? Okay, that's carried unanimously. Thank you very much. Okay, so I'm going to move on to 9.2, which is 128A Harold Street, Mount Lawley, proposed change of use from single house to single house and unhosted short-term rental accommodation. Do I have a mover for this? Moved. Councillor Castle, seconded. Councillor Wolf. Councillor Castle.
Thank you, Mayor. I'm supportive of the councillor recommendation to refuse this application. I think there's substantial evidence as provided in the report as to why this is not a suitable land use in the location that's being proposed. Noting that since COVID, basically, there's been a number of land uses that have been able to to operate without the need for approval for short periods of time. So there is also already an impact on the neighbours in relation to this and other Airbnbs like it in our residential homes. What we're being asked to consider here is whether to allow further amenity impact. I think that there are particular aspects of this this property that make it unsuitable for further use as an Airbnb. One of those being the location of the outdoor area. I don't accept the assertion that I have read in submissions from the applicant that that a short-term rental use has no larger impact on the amenity than residential use. I think that's simply not true. What we know is people are using these locations for their holidays. They're more likely to be socialising and using those areas, and there is a constant churn of people coming in and out, which has an impact on their neighbours. That is a very different use to having a family or a one neighbour living beside you the whole time. So I think that the amenity impacts have been well addressed in the report, and I don't support the application being approved.
Councillor Wolf.
Thank you, Mayor. I also am not supportive of the application. The character at this location is residential, and I think that the proposal will have an adverse impact on the area. Even when you take into account some of the management measures proposed, like the maximum guest numbers, having guests coming and going will change the way that this residential area is used. And I think that the resulting noise and the activity will have an inappropriate impact on the neighbouring properties. Even when you put aside the approval for the pool, I think that the design of the property itself isn't such that those impacts will be sufficiently mitigated. And that's particularly when you consider that outdoor living area that directly adjoins the neighbouring property. I've also considered the community consultation results in coming to this view, which were overwhelmingly not in support of the proposal. And while this isn't something that we are able to take into account because of the planning laws and the planning framework and the way that they're written, I do note that there has been a history of non-compliance in this matter as well.
Councillor LaFontaine.
Thank you, Mayor. I would have to agree with the comments. I'm supportive of a refusal of this application. I think the amenity impacts are the biggest concern, and in particular referring to the comments at last week's briefing in regards to the noise in the bedrooms, that making it hard for kids to sleep. So I think that's a big concern in a residential area. So supportive of refusal. Thank you.
Does anyone else wish to speak on this item? I just want to make a couple of comments. Just to be clear, as Councillor Wolf has indicated already, to give assurance to in relation to the matter which was raised from the gallery, issues of not being able to take into account issues of non-compliance before is not a policy decision of council. It is part of state planning law where it is specifically not allowed to be considered. So I really want to stress that. So when we are asked if we could please change it, you really need to raise that with the state government, because that's where the state laws are made and that's what we are following. I will note that even should council resolve not to approve this particular application, as I understand it, the owner is still going to be able to use the residence as an unhosted short-term facility for 3 months of every year. So all that is happening with this decision is to not have it go beyond 3 months. A reminder that every resident can do this on their property for up to 3 months of the year. So there still will be a capacity for that to occur. I say that also in case the residents nearby who are affected by this adversely going, we thought council knocked this on the head. How on earth is this proceeding? That's should council resolve not to support that. And the answer is because every single resident in Vincent has that right to be able to do that for up to 3 months. So I just wanted to make those comments because I think it's important people are aware of what the framework that we are working within. So, does anyone else wish to speak on this item? Councillor Castle, do you wish to say anything in conclusion? Okay, I'm going to put it. All those in favour of the officer recommendation? Okay, that's carried unanimously. Thank you. So now I'm going to move on to 10.1, LifeVac installation and usage evaluation. And do I have a mover? Moved Councillor Wolfe. Do I have a seconder? Councillor Warner. Councillor Wolfe.
Thank you, Mayor. I really just wanted to take this opportunity to thank administration for all the efforts that have gone into the rollout. That's been a successful and smooth rollout at a very busy time with other priorities, so I wanted to acknowledge that. And I also just wanted to share 2 quick updates, please. One is that LifeVac has become the first and only FDA authorised anti-choking device. It's been granted de novo classification, which formally establishes the device type suction anti-choking device as a second-line treatment under the FDA. So hopefully that helps the journey of LifeVac installation across multiple LGAs and is of interest to Walga, where we have put a motion forward in our zone to further roll out LifeVac in WA. I also just wanted to take the opportunity to note that recently Zaza's Legacy, the foundation from Brian Omondi, who was the initiator of the City of Vincent's rollout of LifeVac, he has started an organisation that has many aims, but one of which is to roll out LifeVacs further in honour of his son Zaza, who passed away. I had the opportunity to attend the launch with Councillor Warner, had helped organise but unfortunately could not attend, and it was great to have the opportunity to talk about the unanimous support that we've had from our council, as well as administration's absolute support. So I was able to talk through the fact that we had given a 3-month period for that report to come to council, but it was completed within a month, and there was great appreciation from everybody who was at that launch, and I think it helped to position us with the City of Joondalup as a leader in this space.
Councillor Warner.
Thank you. I really hate following Nicole. Yeah, I just wanted to follow up on what she is saying, that we are super proud of how the how City of Vincent has followed through with this, and we're super thrilled to see that the results so far have been, on one hand, incredibly successful, but on the other hand, there's been absolutely no need to use it, which is actually the best endorsement we can give. The launch of Zaza's Legacy is a great thing. That's so we're spreading the word. The word is being spread around the communities and to other councils. The clarification that Councillor Wolfe alluded to is also going to help with furthering that. And I know that there are a number of commercial businesses, etc., around Vincent who are now interested in hosting their own, having their own facility. So those little orange boxes I'm expecting to see far and wide, and I'm really, really proud that we were able to be a part of that. Thank you.
Does anyone else wish to speak to this item? Councillor Wolfe, anything? Okay. All those in favour? Carried unanimously. Thank you. So then I'll move on to 11.5, the mid-year budget review 2025-26. This does require an absolute majority. Okay, do I have a mover? Moved Councillor Castle, seconded by... Do we have a seconder for our mid-year budget review? Seconded by Councillor Warner. Councillor Castle?
Thank you, Mayor. Very happy to support the officer recommendation to approve those amendments. It's really interesting to note the changes in the mid-year budget review and where the city has done better than expected, perhaps had to delay some things. I'm particularly interested to note the increase in enrolment fees at Beatty Park continues to go from strength to strength. I mean, let's just say it, it's the best gym in Perth. Clearly our members think so. I also note that there's been an increase in car park revenue and parking infringement revenue, I think that what that actually is telling us is just how busy the city is, and that there is so much happening. A lot of those infringements actually occur around events, but also the revenue from normal car parking is just people out and about in the city of Vincent. So it's very interesting to see how that has changed in this mid-year review. Those are all things that Council's discussing as part of their workshops for our next budget cycle, certainly trying to forecast what next year will look like and try and get it right. Also noting that some of our fees have reduced, and sometimes that's because it is really difficult to find staff to actually carry out some of the services that are required. So these are all things on our agenda for the next budget. So happy to support the redistribution of those extra funds, and look forward to the next budget process.
Councillor Warner.
Thank you. Not much more to say except congratulations to Reece and his team, and keep going. Thank you.
Does anyone else wish to speak to this item? Councillor Castle? I'm going to put the item. It requires an absolute majority. All those in favour? Okay, carried unanimously. Okay, so then we move to 12.1, amendments to the Code of Conduct for Council Members, Committee Members and Candidates, and the Code of Conduct Behaviour Complaints Management Policy. This will also require an absolute majority. Do I have a mover? Moved Councillor Wolfe. Do I have a seconder? Seconded Councillor Warner. Councillor Wolfe?
Thank you, Mayor. I'm supportive. Just to bring together some of the discussion from the report and that we had at the briefing, these changes are the result of legislative amendments to how behavioural complaints have been dealt with, and they have not been initiated by Council. We're subject to statutory time constraints set by the state, and because of that, we're required to adopt a model code by the 1st of April. And that's meant that there'll be consequential amendments to other documents, but it's also impacted our ability to advertise these changes. But do note the discussion that we had at the briefing about the possibility of considering further changes following some release of guidance by either the inspector or by WALGA. And when that happens, that will present the opportunity to consider and also advertise any discretionary amendments that go beyond those required by the regulations.
Okay, Councillor Warner doesn't feel the need to speak. Does anyone else wish to speak to the item? I might make the point that I have got in front of you. I will just say have got a potential amendment on the orange that I'm not allowed to move. I suppose my concern was to ensure that we make it quite clear that whilst we are subject to a code of conduct, that we also are entitled to expect some basic courtesies and response and respect in return. It's part of the preamble. That's what's being proposed, because it's one thing to be subject to a code of conduct, it's another thing to have it weaponised if people don't get their own way. Or even worse, if they're trying to pursue it for political purposes. It's hard to believe it could ever happen. So, Councillor Whedon, you wish to speak?
I do wish to speak. I would really like to table this for orange paper. I would like to move the amendment as presented. Having been
Can
on
I
council,
can I seek a seconder to the amendment if that's what you're speaking to? Seconded Councillor Warner. So Councillor Whedon is speaking to the amendment.
I think it's an excellent amendment that covers a lot. Having been on council for not particularly long, I think already the things I've read and seen and what our staff receive on a daily basis is suboptimal from our community at times. And while this doesn't necessarily address communication with staff, it does address communication with council, and I think it's a great little preamble while we're updating a policy that we're forced to anyway.
Councillor Warner.
Thank you. Just anything that seeks to draw attention to the fact that we are entitled to have our own privacy and our own sense of respect about what we're doing regarded as well as important. People do like to come in here and drop bombs and then leave. They like to put stuff on social media. They like to lodge complaints that have absolutely no basis whatsoever because, I don't know, maybe it makes them feel better. So it's a great, great honour to be sitting in this chair and to be representing and communicating with our community, but the respect must go both ways. So anything that draws a line under that is welcomed. Thank you.
Does anyone else wish to speak to the amendment? Councillor Wolf.
I'd like to give this amendment my wholehearted support as well. Having witnessed over the last 2 years some of the engagements from certain community members with councillors, the way that they've been spoken to or an entitlement around their councillors' time, absolutely support this, and I think having mutual respect going both ways will only lead to better outcomes for the community.
Councillor Castle.
Thank you. At the risk of being repetitive, I agree with everything that has been said on this matter tonight. I think what I want to add is that what we're seeing, generally speaking, nationally, globally, is an erosion of the discourse between community members, between elected officials, between people in positions of authority. There is some, quite frankly, disgusting things being said in general in public, in emails, and because you are elected to represent your community, you are not then the punching bag for everyone with a gross opinion. So I think this is a very small amendment that really sets out what the city will and will not tolerate. I think it sets the tone and it's important. I'd be interested in the next time we review this looking at what else might be needed in the Code of Conduct or in other documents, but for now I think this is a great addition.
Thank you, Councillor Whedon, for moving the amendment. I really do appreciate it. It is just a small point, but I think it's one which we need to start making. I need to make it very clear that the City of Vincent, in terms of the level of abuse that gets levelled at the councillors, is actually less than what I witness in other councils. So we're actually doing relatively well, and yet it's not good enough. As someone who has been in public position since 2008, I can confirm exactly what Councillor Castle is alluding to, that we have seen a steady erosion of the way that people are engaging publicly. Obviously, social media makes it particularly easy for people with an axe to grind to be able to get a public platform, often anonymously. My view of anyone who chooses to engage anonymously is not worth any regard whatsoever. I have no interest. In fact, if you want me to feel contemptuous of you, send something anonymously. I'll just think you're an idiot. So, but and I know that's there you go, violation of the Code of Conduct. But you know what? Put in a complaint, and then I'll know who you are. So it's a moot point. But I think it is sad. I think that we are seeing globally that people are forgetting how to engage in basic civility, and I think it's important we set some standards. We obviously need to demonstrate it, but as Councillor Castle says, we're not here to be people's punching bags either. Does anyone else wish to speak on the amendment? Councillor Whedon, do you wish to say anything in conclusion?
No, I think that's well covered.
I'm going to put the amendment. All those in favour? Okay, that's carried unanimously. So we're now going to go back to the substantive amended motion. Is there anyone who hasn't spoken on the motion yet who wishes to? Okay, so Councillor Wolf, do you wish to say anything in conclusion? I'm going to put it. All those in favour? Carried unanimously. So that's moving on. So we have got our absolute majority. Now we move to 13.1, which is the motions, which previous notice has been given. That's the notice of motion by Councillor Wolf. in relation to native bird protection and preparedness for an avian flu outbreak. So first I'm going to check. Councillor Wolf, are you happy to move that? Okay, and I've already indicated that I'm happy to second that. Councillor Wolf.
Thank you, Mayor, for bringing this item forward with me, and to Jennifer for speaking in support of this item tonight and staying throughout the whole council meeting until the very end. Two things are clear. One, our community is really passionate about protecting our native bird life. And two, native birds are facing increasing and multifaceted threats. Not only have we had major occurrences recently, like the neurological condition causing paralysis in magpies, but we're also facing the threat of a severe strain of avian flu, the H5 strain. This strain can affect birds, mammals, and humans, although human infections are rare, and there is no vaccination at this time. Australia is the only continent that's free of this strain, but experts say that it's only a matter of time. Just last month, H5 was confirmed on Heard Island, which is an Australian territory. And H5 has crossed oceans multiple times, and it's even spread around Antarctica. So the fact that we're an island isn't necessarily protective. There's no way of stopping wild birds from crossing the ocean into Australia. Experts fear that the impact that the H5 strain would have on our native species could be catastrophic. By way of example, in South America, H5 arrived in 2022 and wiped out at least 650,000 wild birds and tens of thousands of mammals. So the potential for large-scale deaths is high. And that impact will be exacerbated for already threatened species like our red-tailed black cockatoos. Federal and state governments are taking steps to prepare for the arrival of H5, and as admin notes, we are awaiting a state government response plan. But to me, all tiers of government, as well as the community and community organisations, will have to play a role in case of an outbreak. The federal government's advice to local governments asks LGAs to engage early with state government on planning arrangements so that our local areas can be well prepared. They say that response strategies should consider possible impacts to wildlife, commercial industries and people, but for local governments particularly to consider the sites and the species of importance to our local area and the role that our local government might play. So for us, we would need to think about things not only like the particular sites and species, but how do we deal with reports to council of sick and dead birds? How and what do we communicate to residents? And how do we address not only our staff's physical safety, but also their emotional and psychological safety in the face of something that could be pretty devastating? So it makes sense that this work should be consistent with the state government response plan, which is why the motion has been amended to seek a report to a workshop discussion rather than a formal report that comes to a meeting. So this could start our thinking on the topic, even if the state plan hasn't been published, and it will give councillors an opportunity to input into next steps. BirdLife Australia also says that the best thing that we can do to keep our species alive, based on what's been effective overseas, is to keep their stress low and their resources ample, because that causes a better immune response. So in that vein, the motion seeks that the CEO report explore other initiatives to better protect our birds. Noting what we've heard from the public gallery tonight around further consideration being needed about protecting birds and nests as part of our street tree pruning, it is great to see from admin's comments that many of these ideas are in progress or can be pursued. So thank you very much, and I thank councillors in advance for their consideration.
Thank you very much, Councillor Wolf, for those opening statements. I'm also, obviously, as the seconder to this motion, very supportive of this, and am looking forward to this being an ongoing discussion that we're having as a council in terms of what we can do to increase the number of birds, and particularly native birds, that we are seeing in Vincent as an inner city. It is actually really special that we have got so much bird wildlife in an inner city environment. Just outside the chamber here, of course, we've got the cocky trough, and there are red-tailed cockies at the moment there every single day, and the males and the females. If you are lucky enough, you will see the feathers dropping around the cocky trough occasionally. They get scooped up pretty quickly, but it is actually extraordinary that we have that level of activity occurring within an inner city. It's quite unique from a global perspective. I just want to pick up on a few points. The first thing is I want to say I think that when we have the underground power rolled out through the whole of Vincent, it's going to be transformational because one of the things it will do is it will actually limit the amount of tree pruning that's occurring on an ongoing basis. And Western Power won't have so many trees available to butcher as they do at the moment. And so that is a proactive thing that we have done as a council. I'm very proud of the fact that not only are we simply undergrounding the power, but that we are following that undergrounding with mass tree planting as well to ensure we're increasing our canopy. But that canopy will be able to grow to its full height without being chopped into, which means that it will be able to serve as valuable habitat. So that's really important. I'm very pleased that the state government is currently calling for submissions in relation to the revised cat laws that will enable councils to potentially have the power to introduce cat containment measures. Of course, this council would need to make a decision on that as an amendment to a local law, but people would know my personal view on this very strongly, that I think there should just be one animal law, that why are you treating cats any differently to how you would treat a pet pig or a dog or a bunny rabbit. Contain it on your property. That would go a big way to actually protecting our bird life as well as our frogs. So that's a big thing that I think is going to be coming up sooner rather than later for us to be able to look at. But I'm really also pleased with the work that's been done to raise awareness of the needs of our birds within our area. I think particularly of the events team and what they've been doing with the bird watching. So I don't know if people have had an opportunity to do that, but it's being done at different seasons and in different areas, which means that you are literally seeing different species of birds migrating through Vincent and learning to spot them and what it is they're doing. That's been used as an opportunity to raise awareness around issues like rodenticide, and ways that you can attract birds and make sure that you are providing necessary amenity in order to help birds, particularly during the very, very hot months. But one of the things that I was very keen to make sure was included in this was the potential outbreak of avian bird flu here in Australia. It's actually, I think, coming. And what I'm very concerned about is I'm not convinced that Australia is yet fully prepared for what that's actually going to look like. We could find that we have gone to so much effort to do as much as possible for our local birds, only to discover that they die en masse. And what does that mean when people see that the birds are just dying in their gardens? How is that going to be addressed? How is that going to be treated? What is going to actually happen? So it's one of those awful looming events that I'm not convinced DBCA's appropriately across yet. I mean, we look at the way that the polyphagous shot-hole borer was addressed, and I don't want this to be that sleeping giant that's just going to undo all the really important work that we are going to be trying to do and continue to do here in Vincent to maximise our bird life. It's pretty special to be able to live in the middle of the city and to just hear a cacophony of beautiful birds, and even the not so beautiful birds looking at you, wattlebird. I don't know if you've ever heard what they sound like. They sound pretty rough, but they're great. I just think they're awesome. So I really would ask you to support this motion. I would love us to be the inner city bird capital, and I think that it's really wonderful the work that's been done, and I look forward to the work we can continue to do. Does anyone else wish to speak on this item? Councillor Castle.
Thank you, Mayor. Look, obviously a lot has been covered by Councillor Wolfe and by Mayor Zamona, and I think I thank you both for preparing this. I think it's an important topic for Council to be dealing with, and I think that I note administration's comments on what is already being done and where we might be waiting for more guidance from the state government. However, I think it is important that this is tabled. It sends a message to our community and to administration that this is an issue that council takes seriously and wants resources to be allocated to. I think we know that there is community groups out there working hard in this space. We have a beautiful little pocket forest coming along that's been planted by Transition Town Vincent to provide food for black cockatoos, and there's lots of things happening around the city, and this is an opportunity to bring all of those ideas and initiatives together and to see how council can be part of that process.
Councillor Whedon.
I'd like to thank Councillor Wolf for bringing this to council. It is excellent, and as someone who lives in an apartment but still manages to have a balcony where I actually discovered a bird's nest on the weekend underneath some bushes and is frequently full of native birds. I very much appreciate how important it is in the inner city. And lighting in particular is my biggest bugbear. And so I like seeing that. My main question actually on this was the control of non-native species and whether that's an issue that the state government's looking at and whether we need to also consider our place in that.
Does anyone else wish to speak to this item? Councillor Wolf, do you want to say anything in conclusion? Okay, I'm going to put this. All those in favour? Carried unanimously. Love our birds. Okay, thank you very much. So, there being no further business to conduct, I thank everyone who's in attendance and on the live